Oye, ¿la presentación dónde está, Pelín?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to be starting in just one more minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the International TMA Talent Management Workshop. I'm happy to have you all here. My name is Sam Reeve, and I'm a managing consultant with CompTeam, and I'll be your host today. And for the past 20 years, I've worked with companies like yours to better attract, retain, and motivate high-performing people and implementing effective talent and reward strategies. And in my consulting practice in working with many growth companies and biotech, financial companies and technology companies, I've come to find that the traditional command and control type of mindset that we see in a lot of American leadership with that hire and fire mentality is just something that's outdated. And so I spent years looking for something better and developing that approach. And my search, and I found the TMA method. It's a talent motivation amplification type process. And this is an approach that was developed in the Netherlands and is now used widely across the globe. And I wondered why this approach was not used more readily in the US. So in my research, I found Andre Blom, which is the co-founder of the TMA International group. And I wanted to learn more. So I soon found myself in a TMA workshop in Paris. and now convinced that this method is going to lead to strategic advantages to all companies that employ this. So the TMA method is used by hundreds of global companies, including Oracle, Vodafone, Philips, Toshiba, among others. And so it's a definitely recognized globally, and we need to bring a little bit more awareness to this in the United States and so forth. So as part of this international forum, we have participants from all across the globe, and we have our international speakers. And our main purpose today is to introduce you to the TMA method, which is a more holistic approach to talent management. It identifies the talent that is right for your company. It helps you engage and motivate them in ways that inspire and foster happiness so that your company can better benefit from a high performance environment and have greater prosperity. So today we're going to hear from those top talent experts across the globe. And we're going to be using they're going to see how they're going to be using the TMA method in their daily practice. So with that being said, let me go to our agenda here of our speakers and introduce our speakers. So here in today's discussion, we're first going to listen and hear from Andre Blom, which is the co-founder and the head of TMA International, located in Portugal. And Andre is going to talk to us about the benefits of integral talent management. Next, we're going to hear from Jorge and Philly Martinez, the siblings that have joined forces at Arancion in Mexico. And they're going to tell us about how the TMA method can optimize talent acquisition and onboarding. And then finally, next, we're going to hear from Peter Tublins as a senior coach and facilitator at Tma in Belgium. And he's going to talk to us about crafting, teaming, and development to the individual. And then Andre is going to come back and join with us again and talk to us about succession and retention. And then finally, we're going to have Andreas Fritsch, executive coach and trainer at the Fritsch Consulting Group in Austria. He's going to talk to us about leadership in the Vuca World. And then finally, we're going to open for questions and open discussion and so forth. But before we get started, there's a few things I want to talk about just as the webinar in general. In addition to the Zoom, this live Zoom presentation that we're doing and this participation, we are multicasting live on several different platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And so if you happen to be on those on a platform other than Zoom, then feel free to you can ask questions in the chat there, but we will probably get to those questions after the session. But if you're on Zoom right now, feel free to use the chat and ask questions throughout the session through there, and we'll bring those up. We'll bring those up at the end of the presentation when we're all together. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Andre Blom, our co-founder at TMA International. And Andre, he started his career at the Dutch Royal Marine Corps, and he studied social science and pedagogy. Sorry, it's hard to pronounce that one. But it's an approach to teaching and a practice of learning and how we process those influences and how it impacts the social, political, and psychological development of learners. So Andre has also spent 12 years with the Dutch police force and training these methods, and he's developed a unique perspective on leadership and total talent management, which he shares with the TMA method. So thanks, Andre. So would you like to get us kicked off here?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sam, for the introduction. And I have to say to the audience, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as we are international and crossing over a lot of time zones. As Sam said before, we have pretty much a holistic approach on talent management. And let me share a little bit where we are coming from. We're coming from the world of assessment, and what we did to make a change is to develop a system and a methodology that helps the individual instead of helping the professional per se as the key point. We believe that if we help the individual and we then deliver an expert system so that the experts can talk with people instead about people. And that is basically the principle of our methodology. It is bringing talent management to the level there it should be. And to give you a little bit of an idea how we look at this holistic approach that Sam was talking about, we brought it down to a couple of steps that is normally recognizable, I think, in a normal HR cycle. If you think about what's going on in the world, and I will not bother you with all kinds of disruptive elements caused through COVID and new technology and geopolitics and all those things. We are all aware of that. What we are aware of it, I think most likely, is that if you really look at the true capital, the true assets of an organization, we come to realize that that is time and that is talents. They add really value to an organization in driving an organization forward, but also to sustain the position and even to get into a competitive edge. It maybe sounds a little bit irrational, but in this sense, money doesn't really make sense. It is what can you do with the resources you have, the material resources. It's all about how people are working together. So I would also say, like, it is a transition from a mode of operation into a future-proof mode of cooperation. Individuals need to contribute in the context of their role, in the context of purpose, etc., etc. Now, to give you a little bit of an idea, the topics that we are handling today comes from let's say, quite a conventional HR cycle, where it's all about how do I acquire the right talents, the right people for the right job. And there I said, stop, you're forgetting something if this is your perspective. It is, of course, about the right people on the right job, but it's also in the right context. And what I mean with the context is how can an individual contribute in his environment in the best appropriate way. And so for us, a match is not only the individual match on the job profile, but it's also the individual match on the cultural aspects, on the team. So it's a more holistic approach than what you normally would see in conventional systems. And then Jorge will tell you a lot about that and a lot about the benefits of it. The onboarding process is, of course, related to the selection of the final applicant. If you want to land a new hire, it is also shown that a lot of new hires are saying like, hey, this is not meeting my expectations. And a recent review survey showed that more than 37% of new hires make the decision in the first 3 months if they stay on board or not. It doesn't mean that they will leave, because of course they have their own challenges when it comes to salary, paying the mortgage, etc., etc. So the onboarding process is extremely important. And it also doesn't handle about where do I find a coffee machine, or do I use Salesforce or another CRM package. No, it's more about how do I align with my team in the context? Do I get the support that I can get onto performance? And as performance is not an individual result of your activities, but it is a joint effort. And therefore, I'm making the step to teaming. You can see that onboarding and teaming are also related to each other. As Sam mentioned before, I am coming from a military world background. And what I've learned there is that they have the opportunity to do a lot about teaming. They always are practicing all kinds of scenarios so that you as a team unit become more resilient, more agile, more flexible in order to deal with the day-to-day cases, even when things are unexpected. And this teaming process is something that is not particularly done in the business life as I know it. I travel around the world, I meet many customers, many partners, and you hardly see that teaming is really on the program of an organization. They never go through the scenarios. And if you don't do that, then how can you get the best out of your performance as a team or as an individual? How can you learn from each other? How can you be more agile? How can you be more resilient if you don't train these scenarios? And again, teaming is not about having a nice barbecue once a year, but it is really getting into the business. And then key of our system is actually development. And one of my phrases are, if there is no individual development, how can there be organizational development? As I said before, time and talents are your true valuable assets that can really make a difference. And if you don't develop people, if you don't offer them the opportunity for personal development, if you don't engage, if you don't contribute, if you don't pay attention to their personal development, then how can you grow as an organization? One of my statements that I want to make very strongly here is like, there is no organizational development if there is no personal development. If there's no personal development, you as an organization are taking kind of the responsibility and you're accountable for heading for a lock-in. And that is not a lockdown like COVID, but at some point you cannot move anymore because the distance to the market needs are too big. So non-development even leads to a total meltdown. You have to constantly invest in people in order to make sure that you are sustainable and have a future together. Now, another element that is related is succession. And succession is the successor in place? And there are actually two scenarios. Are you planning that on a long term? Are you then clear about what the roles for the future will be? And can you identify the talents and the potential of your people, of your workforce in order to make that promise? But there's also something like an emergency. What if one of your key players or members is falling out by finding another job, or even more in a bigger disaster, an accident or death or whatever? How do you prevent that there is a brain drain, a knowledge drain? How can you make sure that succession is in place? And that is pretty much related to development. I will elaborate on that later. And then the element of retention. Facing all the customers and partners, in many cases, I'm asking for what is the big challenge of an organization? And they always talk about the retention of talents. And then I'm asking, what are you doing then to retain your talents? Do you give them the opportunity? What is the individual perspective? What is the organizational perspective in retaining people? And is it okay to let people go? Or can you go to right placement? This is what I will elaborate later on. But key, and my dear friend Andreas will help you with that. The key of the whole is what I call integral talent management. It means integral leadership. It's an holistic approach. If you see the role and position of HR, they call the most common title is HR business partner. That means that the leaders or the managers and the HR should be really aligned and should join forces in order to make sure that all these elements, from acquisition to onboarding until outplacement or right placement, are done together. For me, the experts, the HR people can help with identifying the talents and frame the right working conditions, as where the leaders are doing it into day-to-day business. So they are really engaging with their staff and need to practice on development of competencies. So this is the whole holistic approach where leaders are engaged, involved, and committed on all these elements. That is what you could say our conventional approach for a holistic talent management approach. Can you please switch to the next sheet? I will give you now a little bit of an idea what strategic integral talent management includes. And as my dear friend Andreas, he will come back later, said so kindly, it takes a mindset before you can choose a tool set. And of course, the TMA is delivering a wide range of tools and insights and content. We deliver a whole infrastructure. But what it is about, it is the mindset. And the mindset starts with the purpose. Is there a meaningful existence for shareholders, but also for the stakeholders? So many times you think as an organization, I have to please my shareholders, but so many people are working. There are so many stakeholders who want to have a meaningful existence and have a meaningful contribution. And for that, as an organization, I think you are obligated to have a clear value-driven process in this. when I go to my customers, I'm not talking about I'm going to create value. No, I'm going to realize value from the value creation you already have in an organization. So it is really a process. Unlock that treasure, open up the box and work on it to realize and to make your values really blossom. And on the next level, when you think about what are we doing, then we have a purpose and we have values. Then I think there are three key elements that an holistic approach needs. And those three elements is the first thing you have to do is to make sure that your workforce is cognizant. In other means, are they capable of taking the future with you? And are their talents aligned with the business objectives? That is the first thing you have to do as an organization. Secondly, and not less important, it is about individual welfare. And Sam is a specialist in compensation and benefits and how to align that and shaping a kind of a common framework and a reference for all the employees. Like, you know, you're paid for the job, you're paid for your contribution. We're taking care of you with health benefits, all kinds of elements. But it is also about the immaterial benefits that somebody is getting. And then I'm thinking about, are you recognized? Are you rewarded? Are you appreciated? To feel really comfortable that as an individual, you feel like I matter. You know, I don't want to stay home because I have a headache and take an aspirin, but I will go because I feel that I am not replaceable, I am valuable. And that is what I mean with individual welfare. Now, if you look at an organization has different kinds of populations. Think about professional populations. You have accountants, account managers, you have product managers, etc., your whole front end, your back end. Different people working with different profiles coming together, and that's creating a community that it wants to work for each other, that lives for each other, that makes something valuable in the road to create value into realization. And then a community takes part of a ecosystem. As an organization, you are having a local position. You can do something with societal welfare. Think about what happens now with COVID. If I can take this example, where people are constrained, have to work from home, stressed, feeling isolated, excluded. To give you an idea, here in Europe, when we think about the impact on society when it comes to abandoncy, when it comes to stress, when it comes to violence, domestic violence, child abuse, just because people have to work from home and they feel disconnected and they feel sad and they are disturbed. So I think as an organization, you should also aware that you have an impact on your maybe micro society around it, but social welfare is, I think, a very strong element to keep people together. And then if I come to the next layer, what is so important is that there should be a culture that is opening up for talents, that we look at the potential, a culture where we are working together, where there's social cohesion, where there's professional cohesion, where there's room for failure as fast learning. When I oftentimes say, like, fail is just an acronym of a first attempt in learning. And that is a culture that we should have. We should not say, you done bad and let's try to improve your weaknesses, but let's create a culture where we say, like, we will improve your strength and we will rise and thrive all together. And that says something about leadership. And then there's another thing. In this world, we cannot live with data, and data is the business of each and every employee. Without data, you are lost. You cannot get any direction. You have to have a look at trends. You have to have a look at forecasts, but also data when it comes to what have we done? Can we learn from that? So that data is extremely important, but also when it comes to succession planning or to resource planning, We need to understand how our population is ticking and what we can do with them. And then it comes to innovation. Innovation, of course, is also related to development and even to personal development. You can talk about social innovation, but you can also talk about innovation of your product, of your services. And it doesn't mean that you have to make a game changer, but you have to be aware there are a certain level of innovation, even fine-tuning a little bit the process or a little bit the product. That is also a form of innovation, and that can be done if you really listen and are open up to the people who are working with it. They have brilliant ideas, and a lot of brilliant ideas are brilliant failures. But if you don't try innovation, you will not get there. And as a total mindset, I want to say, like, the strategic integral talent management is all about inclusion. If you look at the behavior of people, as soon as you feel excluded, you're not in anymore. You will become obsolete, you will become an anarchist, you will you will not go the extra mile again. And it's also about active participation. Don't talk over people, about people, but talk with people and work with them and be an active participant. And it doesn't matter what kind of role, if you're a leader or an employee, it doesn't matter. We have to unite. It's all about inclusion and active participation. That will create a culture that will drive you forwards. And in the time that we are living, of course, these are buzzwords. Working agile and being resilient. Well, I think we also learned that in the last couple of years, with so much disruption, we have to work in a different way. We cannot work blue ocean anymore. We have to reinvent ourselves. We have to be flexible. We have to be adaptive. If things doesn't work, sometimes you need to have a hands-on approach. If you are creating new programs or developing new technologies, you cannot say, like, I have a roadmap and we will develop and then deliver. You have to make these little sprints. You have to be together, have to open up, have these, I won't call it brainstorm sessions, but really have these momentums where you sit together and say, like, can we have a retrospection? What have we done? What are we going to do the next 2 weeks? How can we be more resilient and be adaptive to the needs of the markets, so that we have a sustainable future? And then, as a last introduction, of course, money, we live in an economy that is driven by money. Currency has always been important. But what I would say now is that the amount of money doesn't make the difference anymore. Talents and time are more scarcer than capital. And so we should really, really focus on how can we be most effective by focusing on the talents and let people do what they are good at, looking at their strength, because that will give a lot more performance than trying to stretch the time, to put in more money, go to more courses, more expensive consultancy. No, try to look from inside. Then people will really engage and will give you a jump start and maybe even a better competitive edge. So this is what we understand from strategic integral talent management. And like I said, and like all my partners are saying, it's not about the tool set, it is about the mindset. If you have the right mindset, then you can go forward. So this was my short introduction. I'm gladly handing over the mic back to Sam, our host. Thank you, Sam.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Andre, for getting us started on this. And so next, I would like to introduce you to Jorge Martinez. Let me see if, there we go. And so Jorge has more than 20 years of experience. And let me see if did everybody see the screen there? So Jorge has more than 20 years experience in companies such as JP Morgan and Nextel and Chubb and so forth. And he's developed a lot of coaching methodologies to help companies better onboard people and better talent or source people with the right talents to bring them on board. So I'd like to introduce you, Jorge. And let me see if I can take you off mute there. All right.
Okay. Hello, Sam. I don't know if you can also see me.
No, I cannot. If you might need to share your camera there.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Let me see. Do you see me?
No, I don't see you, Jorge, but we can hear you.
Okay. Is this okay? Do you want me to? Because it says that I need to be. Because the host has to stop it. I mean, do you want me to only to go with the audio? Do you want me to hold the visual of me?
Yeah, go ahead, Jorge. You can go ahead and get started. Well, I'll see if I can get your video to work.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much for invited us to this webinar. I really want to talk about the talent acquisition in the first part. So. And I really want to begin with the idea that most of the HR practices that a lot of companies are currently using were designed for a time in which the changes were not as often as we do now. So what we have now is that a lot of HR, I mean, a lot of people in the business world are dealing now with uncertainty and a lot of doubts regarding how we can manage or allocate the people in our organization to get the most out of them. And the first thing that we inherit from the past is how we consider the job or how we make the job. How would you describe the job for the organization? And let me just see. Start my video. Great. Now you can see me. Perfect. Thank you, Sam. So, and this is one of the first things that we do that we encourage people is that consider the job in a different way. And I really want to and this cartoon, this explained in a very specific way how I think about the job description. In this cartoon, we see Snoopy. Snoopy, what did you choose to be a dog? Because I was fooled by the job description. The way in which traditional described jobs are are obsolete because they don't reflect the changes that we need to reflect and to make a decision about the people and also to involve candidates about the scope of the position. So the traditional job description in general terms describe experience, activities, goals, and when we go for competencies, we're talking about a good wish that maybe we don't know how to evaluate. I don't know if these things that we describe in the job description are attached to the success of the position. So we're basically using an old method in order to make decisions about people. So in many ways, the traditional job description is obsolete. And let me put you a bit of an example. When you just make when you have in your mind that you want to incorporate someone new into your team and you want to recruit someone, or you want to maybe to move one person from your organization to another position, what you have in your mind in a subconscious level is one or two things. First, you want to solve a problem, or second, you want to achieve a certain result. In many cases, they're a mix of both. So in many cases, the traditional job description only describes the job itself. So my first question would be, what would anyone be interested in your job if you're describing the same activities that someone who is qualified is already doing? I mean, when people see that, I mean, the only thing that they do in their mind, it says, okay, how much? So what is the impact, the economic impact that I'm going to have in order to experience, so in order to get this job? So it is a very incomplete way. So what we do in many companies is we have a meeting with a hiring manager, in which we have an hour in which he described the things that he is aware at the present moment. I mean, he needs to fill the position, and he describing the things that he brought in his mind at this moment. So when the HR people or the headhunter firm goes and make the search, in many cases we act as an order taker. So the client asked me for this and this. So we need to a better way in which we can interact with the hiring manager in order how to explain the job itself. So what we recommended to use is something that we created. It's a work role canvas. So a work role canvas is a map in which you can use, in which you can see, you can connect your hiring manager with the left side of your brain with the right side of your brain, in which they can both experiment and they can see the implications that this position will have over the future. So one of the things that we trying to so this model is made of 4 major pillars. One is the understand the business model of the company and the world of the hiring manager. So in order to, before explain me what is the job of the position, please help me, hiring manager, to understand what is the success might look like to you, for you as a hiring manager. Okay, and then you start there because you really want to understand the success of the boss of the position of the hiring manager, and then you can go back and to understand. And the second part would be to understand the context of the position. So in this context, you have a framework in which you can ask a lot of questions. Could you go back a little bit, please? In which you can go back and understand a lot of questions about the position and also the success of this. So you have now two major elements. So once you have understand what the success might look like for the hiring manager as a boss, and then you understand and you help them to guide your hiring manager to understand and to express the context of the position, then you can go back to help your client to discuss the compensation and the process that you might, the compensation and the process that you might need to look when you're working on the recruitment part. So once you understand those 3 pillars, then you can go back and in a very easy way, you can use the competencies. So, and the competencies, TMA has a fabulous tool, which is completely free, which is the Competency Library. You can do it online. You can set competencylibrary.com, in which you can see 53 competencies, the examples of behaviors in 4 major areas. But one thing that it is extremely important for these competencies is that most of the examples that this competency library provides are examples of behaviors that are little room for interpretation from either the boss or maybe the person in the position. So I think it's a really, really good competency library. So my understanding to not only to close for this part in the recruitment part in the talent acquisition is what if we consider a better way in order how we can work with the hiring managers in order to help them to succeed. So my recommendation is to have 2 instead of 1 meeting in which only one people is expressing what he wants, is to, okay, we have 2 meetings. First, we're going to have 1 meeting in which I'm going to explain to you, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And then in my second meeting, which is a very short one, I want to explain to you how this work role canvas works. So in the third slide, in the next slide, this is just an example in how it is a very visual way in which people can connect the 2 sides of a brain, the creative part and also the logical part. So in this part, as you can see, there's a black, a blue one, and a yellow one. So this is just an example how to work with the work role canvas in which you can explain to them the context. I mean, to be completely aligned with your hiring manager, how the job really is. So this exercise is also very helpful, not only in the recruitment part, but it is extremely valuable when we go into the onboarding section. So instead of providing a long Word document in which there's a lot of text, in which we never use it. I mean, we provide we made the document and then go back and never use it again. This is a living document that can help organizations to realize the scope of the position and to help these people to succeed in the position.
Great. Great, thanks, Jorge, for taking us through that on how to identify and select the right talent. So now what I'd like to do is introduce everyone to Tma Martinez, a master trainer of talent management and methodologies at Antioni. She has over 20 years of experience as a leader, and Pili is passionate in talent management, and she's achieved success in results in across supply chain, operations, marketing, sales, organizations, and so forth. So she's a very wide set of skills. She's also recognized as a international master trainer of talent and leadership methodologies. So Pili, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much for the introduction. I'm saying hello to everyone from Mexico City. I was listening to what Andre and Jorge were talking about regarding all the talent management cycle, and what I would like to talk about right now is the second phase of onboarding, which goes exactly after what Jorge just showed to us, which is acquisition. Before going to that, when we're looking for someone, it is quite difficult to understand what is the best match of a person with a profile or the position, or with what Jorge was showing us as the work role canvas, right? So TMA has helped us a lot working with this part, understanding the potential of a person in a scientific way. It is very common that in human resources processes, we talk about perception and what we see of a person, but not exactly what it is. So we try to make our ideas of a person with just one look at that person. And that is the biggest mistake in the acquisition process. So aligned to what Jorge has been sharing with us, our great experience with TMA is to reduce this gap that we usually have. But what we have seen in our process in Mexico, and we have seen it all over the world as well, is that when you hire someone, recruiters mostly say, okay, the position is filled and that's it, you know, and my work is already done. But the biggest issue of the success in a position is regarding the onboarding process. And if there is a problem with a candidate that has been hired, the fail goes to the hiring manager or probably to the recruitment team. Why? Because you didn't get the best match for this position. So I would like to share some of the realities that we find in an onboarding process, which in most cases, it doesn't happen. You know, there is no onboarding process. But first of all, what you can see in this slide is first of all, the challenges of a new hire. Every person that covers a new position, it doesn't matter if the person comes from outside of the organization or probably from the inside of the organization, a person that has been promoted. The first challenge that they have is the new hire doesn't know anyone from the team. Probably I am covering a new position and I don't know the team, you know? So this is a huge challenge because I have to go in a cycle of knowing the person I'm working with, my manager, or probably my own team, and I have to understand the best way of communicating with them, right? The second one is people want to be successful in their new role, right? So when you're not successful in the first month, your confidence and also the engagement that you're having, it goes down, because normally you want to do your best, and if there is no recognition of doing that, then it goes down, right? Working with people that also applied to your job, that is very common. There are 3 people that they are applying and just one gets the job, and the other people are going to be part of your team, either colleagues or your subordinates, right? So that is a challenge as well, because you have to engage them with you in that role, and that is a huge challenge. Another one is inheriting some other problems. I am using here an example of budget crisis, but there are some other problems with any knowledge of any solution. And people are expecting you to be successful at the very beginning. So that is a huge challenge that you have in any position, right? Finding credibility and qualifications, because of course the recruitment process was done by certain people, the manager, probably the hiring manager or the boss of the hiring manager, and the recruitment team. But the rest of the team, they are not quite sure who you are. Are you really qualified or not? So your confidence is a little bit stuck in there, right? And at the end, the expectation is for you to do everything good in 3 months. So whatever has been done in 3 years badly, you need to solve everything in 3 months. So those are some of the challenges that a new hire goes through. And the biggest mistakes, and I am here numbering just some of them, but I would be quite open to read any of your experiences regarding this. The biggest issues or mistakes that happens in an onboarding process is, first of all, failing to engage the employees on the first day. That is awful, because you just leave them by themselves. Okay, this is your new job and that is your problem. Thank you very much. The second one is expectations are not clarified. You know, we defined a process, a work role canvas, in which we tried to understand what we are expecting of the person, but we never shared it with the hiring candidate, you know? So he doesn't know what you're expecting from him. And that also includes the cultural fit. You know, you have never talked to him about the cultural fit and how I see you doing that cultural fit. And at the end, regular feedback. So in the next slide, I would like to show you my 3 steps, which honestly, they are not mine, they are TMA's. So the first one, align expectations with the employee. TMA has helped us to define a competency profile in which expectations are clearly defined. As Jorge said, the Competency Library has clear behavioral examples that help us to define what we're expecting. So if we not only define that, but if we share it with the candidate, it is great, because he is not only knowing the goal, but how to get to the goal. And that is crucial. Also, define or understand the communication style. With TMA, we have been able to understand what is the best way to communicate with the people. So if the new hire needs a better way to communicate with him, and I know it as a leader or as a manager, it is great, because I don't have to go to the experience of failing with my new hire. You know, I already know how to motivate with my communication to him or her. The second step that I recommend is encourage networks in the organization. This means that to get a success in a new position in the onboarding is clue to engage the candidate or the hiring candidate. But the thing is, if we don't help him to understand the network in the organization, it is going to be tough. But what happens if the person has a really has experienced a difficult time doing this network due to his talents. We need to help him and to understand what are the best tips or the best way for him to get to this network. And that is going to be Clue. And TMA helps us to do that. And the third one is develop from day one. And one of the things, the most important things of development is feedback. I have seen many tools in the market, and I have experienced with several tools of different types. And I have never seen a tool that helps us to get feedback every day. I mean, feedback is a gift, you know, and if we don't get something to make the feedback easier for me as an employee or for me as a manager, I just don't do it, right? So TMA offers this unsupervised feedback, which is a tool that helps us to give feedback or to receive feedback whenever I want. So these are my 3 steps of onboarding, and from my side, it is all what I wanted to share, Sam. I'm sorry if I extended a little bit, but I really love to talk. From my side, I think this is it, Sam. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pili. That's great. And so, just one second here. So next, I'd like to introduce you to Peter Tublins. And so Peter is a senior coach and facilitator at Tick Your Talent, and it is most notable for it's a consulting company that has worked with companies like Deloitte Consulting, Danone, and among others, some sports organizations such as the Olympic team of Belgium. So Peter is passionate about guiding management teams and strategic workshops, and he has provided talent-centered coaching for high potential people in their leadership and advises organizations and especially their people on change management. Peter coaches and facilitates in Dutch, French, and English on a global basis. So we're very fortunate to have him here. Thank you, Peter. Welcome to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sam. Happy to join all of you and to share some experiences. Let me focus first on the teaming aspect. Andre was saying you have no organizational development without individual development. I should add, you have no teaming development without, so you have no organization development without teaming development. I invite you to reflect on your own team, all of you, and ask yourself the next questions. To what extent is your team more self-reflecting or full of self-confidence? Well, when your team is more self-reflecting, probably you will have a lot of long meetings, a lot of rich discussions. When you have a team that's full of self-confidence, the tricky situation could be that you want, based upon your self-confidence, to launch a lot of different projects with a lot of, let's say, pushback from the rest of your organization. The second question, is your team giving space to each other or taking space? Again, important. Imagine you're a C-level team. When you give a lot of space, this is a present for the environment. When you have a C-level team that's taking space, well, be careful. It can be good because you're positioning yourself, but it can take some space from the people in the organization. The third one, is your team patient or more enterprising? Interesting, because being enterprising, you will tend to launch a lot of things at the same moment without any prioritization. When you're patient, you will probably have a natural feeling of temporization and choosing the right priorities at the right time. The fourth one, is your team easily satisfied or more competitive? Well, interesting, when we discuss, for instance, performance reviews, it's interesting to know the drivers of your team members and of your team as a whole. The first one, but last one, is your team more compliant or leading? Well, believe me, a C-level team, for instance, that's too compliant, probably the other stakeholders will not be too happy. When you have a really leading team with natural energy based upon their own drivers, this gives a lot of opportunities. And the last one, is your team creative or practical? Well, all these questions, all these dilemmas can be measured by the material that's provided by the TMA method. And what's important is, and I confirm what Andreas said in the beginning, you need as a first element the mindset, and then you can start with a tool set. Now, why is this important? Because reflecting on this gives you the opportunity to take the best out of your team, and within your team, out of the best out of your individuals. The period we face now is a very challenging one for teams. We work on distance. We have all learned to work with video seminars and webinars, including myself. So it's very important to understand the importance of teaming. And these are some questions that can be very, very useful to talk with each other and not about each other within the teams. Let's go to the next slides. A few recommendations. My first recommendation is please unplug your teams. For the music lovers here, you know probably the unplugged music versions of very classical pieces of music. I always remember the Nirvana unplugged long player. So Team Unplugged has a double sense. The first sense is let's go back to basics. Let's go back to the core of your team by knowing the drivers of every individual. And the second level, literally unplug your team from the operational day-to-day business. Give them the opportunity to take some space. Give them the opportunity to do some meta thinking on the day-to-day reality. It's absolutely professional quality time. In the next slide, another element I also face in real, in day-to-day working with teams and C-level teams. Well, it's so important to have the respect for individual diversity. And so we are able to measure the team drivers. We are able to determine the talents, to determine the preferred attitude, the consequences of when I'm working with teams. It's always a fun activity, and it's really a source of energy in itself. So when you can do this with respect to individual diversity, you're at a higher level than before. And diversity, you can see it in a very wide way. And the classical, let's say, society, the diversity descriptions, but also diversity in drivers and talent zones. So this is important. Sometimes you have team members who are doing things that cost them a lot of energy without knowing that another peer is really getting energy by the same thing. And this is important to map, to discuss, to share. Why? Because it gives another level of cooperation. In the next slides, a few last elements related to teaming, because I can talk for hours, but our time is limited, of course. The basic thing, why did I love TMA when I saw Andre the first time about 8 or 9 years ago now? Well, all the stuff, all the material is really strengths-based. And I'm a big believer, have always been that we are there to accept that when things are good, that it's normal. Well, it's not enough. When it's good, we should share it with the same passion the passion we share constructive feedback to each other. So the strengths-based dimension is, for me, key in teaming. And teaming, okay, there are a lot of things happen to develop, let's say, the team building, like it's sometimes called. You can have a drink together, you can have a walk together, whatever. This type of dimension is really something that gives an added value, and I'm so happy to confirm this in my day-to-day cooperation. Now, a last thing is a very short story on John. John is the CFO in a European company, about 4,000 people working there, rather known in Europe. And what happened during a team session I had with the company executive committee, at a certain moment, we were sharing feedback. And some people have, for instance, the need on a lot of variety. Other people have the need of focus. And I do not know anybody who gets the same level of energy from focus and from the need of variety. So people who like variety, they look more high level. They have difficulties to close cycles. People who like to focus, well, everything should be correct. So what's typical with CFOs? Well, a lot of CFOs are perceived as people who have a big need on focus. Why? because they're there to approve the right figures to present to the board. They need to be precise in the legislation reportings, etc., etc. Well, during a team session, at a certain moment, what did we see? We saw that John hated focus and details. So all his colleagues from the executive committee were very, very surprised because they knew John as a very precise guy, and everybody who had some questions on figures and details, etc., they went to John and they were really well helped. But John hated it. So why is it so important? This was shared on the moment. This was a kind of aha-erlebnis, like we say in German. Andreas knows that very well. So this is important to understand. When you share this, the company took some decisions. What did they do? They hired somebody and they gave John more a role in merging and acquisitions to more strategic level. The guy has been happy as it can be after that session. Just a little example to show what it could be. On the next slide, it's just a picture of the tooling behind all this. So there are a lot of opportunities. I will not go in detail. You can contact us later on if this is interesting to you. This is about teaming. Another element, another dimension you were asking me to share some thoughts is on personal development. Well, it's something, again, where I could share hours and hours together with you. I will not do it now, but let me share some thoughts on that one. Maybe the first one, on the next slide, I work with 3 visuals here. You see you, we, me. For me, the basic element on personal development within professional context is to start with a very good self-knowledge. Well, believe me, a little bit like Billy said, I screened the market for 15, 20 years. Once I saw the opportunities of the TMA method, I was absolutely enthusiastic. Why? Because for me, the TMA method and using that material is a kind of boost of self-knowledge. So the last 2 days, I had 7 or 8 meetings, coaching meetings with people on TMA. So I'm really in the TMA flow now, as you can see. The boost of self-knowledge is key. So when you start in development, please help your people to try to know themselves. You don't always need the tooling, but this tooling is fantastic to give it a boost. This is a first reflection. Another reflection on the next slide is, yeah, probably you're convinced about it, but please never stop learning. But never stop learning is too vague for me. I see a lot of people who spend a lot of energy in learning things where they have a lot of difficulties and where they're spending energy to learn it. Well, it's far more interesting. It's far more effective to learn based upon your own drivers. So if you, for instance, really hate to be on a theater stage, to explain, to convince, etc., and you have a colleague who can do that better than you, please give the floor to that colleague and develop other elements. So it's good to stretch, it's good to go out of your what's called comfort zone, but it has its limits. And knowing yourself in personal development gives you the opportunity to choose very well the topics that are suitable to you to develop. And this is key. So knowing your own drivers is really a big important element. Another element I like to share is the next one. It's about how to learn. Should we learn drop by drop, or should we learn by full buckets of water? Well, maybe you understand what I'm going to say. Well, let's try to learn drop by drop. Let's be patient. Let's invest in our people in a sustainable way. Let's take our time. I'm really not a believer in one-shot interventions. This is one of the first things I always say when I share opinions with companies to take this type of investments. Drop by drop, take your time. Why? Because people do not only learn from the moments you are sitting together with them, but they learn from each other, and give them the time to learn each other. And about talking about each other to talking with each other, well, I have a lot of examples that I can share one day if you like me to share that, where people learn to talk with each other. So it's not something, let's say, vague or not tangible. It's really tangible. You can observe it. And this is key. And so then you have a situation and the mindset where people have been developing themselves in order to get the good organizational results. So this is what I wanted to share with you. Maybe a last slide, just again to show the tooling that can be used. And another one, Sam, thanks for that. Yeah, this one. One of the tools that are really good are the performance matrix. Why? Because you can combine what you show in reality with what you're talented for. And that's interesting because sometimes people show a lot of attitude without being talented. So it costs energy. Other people are talented for some attitude aspects and they do not show it again. Of course, this is easier to develop. Well, this is just a little example. I hope I have inspired you a little bit in this short time. Thanks again for the invitation and good luck with all your investment in people and in yourself. Thanks a lot and hope to see you later.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing all that wisdom. That was great. Thank you so much. Well, next what we have is Andre is going to come back on and speak on a few things. So we're going to talk about succession and retention. So Andre, back to you.
Thank you, Sam. Let me, before I start, first share how proud I am that my colleagues and partners around the world are sharing this in this setup. It really gives me a feeling that we have a very strong community, and that is also something what we're trying to accomplish with the method. So, and I'm sure that Andreas is going to be amazing too, like the other three performers. Let's talk about succession and retention. And as I said before, things are interrelated with each other. It is a mindset. And of course, when you talk about succession planning, it is a systematical approach into make sure that your future is set and secured when it comes to your workforce. But there are some elements in it that I want to share with you coming from the experience with many companies. Well, one of the things that is staggering me the most is that we are not, we don't have the courage to share with people that they are the intended successor. There are all kinds of systems. Behind the doors, a nine-point grid, and if you're on 8 and 9, then you might be a successor, but let's not share that with the individual because there might be some consequences or some claims on that. Well, I think that that is a wrong approach. You should be transparent, and it should be absolutely clear that once somebody is identified as a successor based on his talents, then he should know it, because this is also where the personal development comes from. How can you develop yourself to become the next one in line to take over if you're not aware that you are the successor? Another element in succession planning is also based on what profile. As we live in a very dynamic, uncertain world, the Vuca world, where Andreas will talk later about it, how can we make sure that we have the profile for, let's say, in three years' time? Are we agile enough? So, of course, the profile is an element into identify if somebody is fit to follow up. But there's also something else to it. There is a dynamic. And let me share a very nice experience that I had in Saudi Arabia with my partner. We were working for the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. And it was a newfound organization. And we had a senior leadership training, a 2-day event. And remarkable as it was, they all these leading managers, leaders, had their successor next to them. They were already engaged. So they were actually like teaming up, like buddy systems, where they could exchange things so that the handover later on, and for nobody it was clear when it would happen, but they were identified. And I think that is a nice way to go. Think about succession planning as an instrument where you prevent a brain drain. You don't want to be confronted with the fact that one of your key players is all of a sudden leaving because a bigger company with better compensation and benefits or with more career perspective offered him the job. And that is what is happening a lot of times. Then he comes to you saying like, I want to resign. By the way, I have still 20 holidays left. Can I resign by tomorrow and be paid off? That is not something we want to be confronted with. And therefore, we also have to take in mind that succession planning has also something to do by contingency and with long term. Of course, we can plan on long term, but we also have to be aware that there can always be an emergency. Let's call it an emergency. Somebody is leaving without any notice in advance, or something terrible happens and he's brought down by a disease or whatever. We should be aware that succession planning, somebody taking over, the handover should be smooth. And why don't we do that from the front, from the start? And there's another element that I want to share with you. It is, how do we explore this? Do we give the successor enough space and the one who is in position to collaborate and to explore the opportunities? There's also a learning element in it. If I take my own position, I have my wingman, Abdallah Ahmad, and he is working with me. And what I say to him, dear Abdallah, let me learn from you. Explore your limitations. And one of my management style is, if I cannot add 20% more added value, then I shut up. Because of course I am living as somebody in position in my own little paradigm, perhaps even what I would call my open dogma. I have my own way of thinking, at looking at something in retrospective or in perspective. But I am restricted in my own experience. I am biased, and by asking Abdallah to go forward and to learn from both sides, my position gets better. I'm getting more broadly developed, and I give him the opportunity to become my successor. So that exploration is, I think, so important when it comes to succession planning, and that is not just something like doing it because HR is asking you, what is your successor? There's also something about looking forward, and when you get into position, why don't you address that to somebody? That takes some courage and some commitment. If I want to commit myself to my job and make sure there is no brain drain, then I should also talk and I have a dialogue with my successor in how to do that. And not just at the end of my position. When I start the position, I already know I'm going to be here for 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever, but I can still work on making sure that all the knowledge is not lost when I'm gone, or when I fail out by a disaster or whatever, some traumatic experience. And those things can happen. And another element in succession planning is also about experimenting. That means give your successor a role, let him experiment, and don't be afraid that he's making a mistake. Even when he makes a mistake, it's also something I said before, it doesn't matter, it's just the first attempt in learning. But learn fast and do that together. So this experiment in making sure that the knowledge, the experience, the skills, the understanding, the context of the role and the way to the future is done together. And therefore, I think you have to really think about what are the roles that we are taking in this position in order to have a successful in place. And there's another thing that I want to address. Why is it that we are only doing succession planning for the key roles? Please ask yourself that. If we talk about inclusion, about everybody is unique and everybody can contribute, everybody has a specific skill set, a specific preferred behavior. If we are only doing succession planning in framing it in one person, or only succession planning in the frame of key roles, only for managers, I think we make a huge mistake. I believe that every position is worth to have a successor. That every position should have a kind of lineup and say, like, how can I collaborate? How can I make sure that my knowledge, if I'm an expert, even a receptionist, has somebody and says, like, this is what I do. How can I learn from you? And how can I transfer this? Now, in order to have a good succession planning, and to have an idea about how you can deal with that, it is very important, that is what I stated in my first thing, that you have data. If you have an overview on your workforce, where the gifts are, where the talents are, have an idea about the ambition of people, knowing that, like Peter said, that they can develop themselves on their core drives, on their strength. If you have that idea and you have that data, then you are more objective and you will be more solid in doing your succession planning. And again, it's not about who has the best bachelor or master degree, or who is the biggest expert and what is the most critical position. We are a community that consists of different populations, and we have to unite. And the key is really tap in on the talents. And I also think, when I'm making the relation to retention, how important succession planning is to sustain your future. So my statement would be, think about it. In your own position, is your successor in place? What can you do to help the organization? What is in it for you? You as in a leadership role or in a manager role, if you know that your successor is coming, what does that do to you when it comes to your career move, or the mobility of the workforce in the organization, or the learning elements that you can actually grasp by having a good succession planning for your organization. So I hope that I gave you some considerations and some inspiration to see that succession planning is so much aligned with personal development and so much aligned with retention. So let me step into the next level of retention. In many business cases that I have been involved through my partners and on my international tours, retention is always an issue. They always say, like, how do we retain our talents? And why is that? And then, of course, we can talk about, well, if you want to retain the people, maybe you should have had a better look on how you recruit them, or how you onboard them. Or what I also learned from Sam, if you want to have top people for a longer time, are you paying them the top dollar? In other words, it's not only about money, but it is also about what are the compensation and benefits? Do you really provide a future for them? And why is it that we never have a retention dialogue every year, but only an appraisal every year? You've done well, or you haven't done so well. So let's take a few perspectives in this. And I think the first thing, we are not a philanthropical organization where everybody can just do whatever he wants and be paid for whatever he charges, he wants for that. But let's look at the enterprise perspective. I think, first of all, it is about acceptance. Acceptance, authenticity. Accepting that we have an individual, and when this person can engage and be productive in an authentic way, and we accept that, then we have a good employee on board. And this is also how loyalty starts to exist. And another thing is camaraderie. Being well appreciated, feeling that people want to make an extra mile for you, showing that they are a solid and valuable member in the community, feeling that there is social cohesion. That is, I think, is very important. It comes from your culture to retain your talents. It is actually, I think, psychologically very tough if you feel that you are an important member of a community to step out. Let's give an example in your family life. How easy is it for you to get divorced, or to say goodbye, as Simon Sinek says, to your family members? You're not here, so I don't need you anymore. Let's go. You don't let them go. So this social cohesion, the feeling that you belong something, that is really important. And then there's another thing with fairness, with retention, and that is fairness. How many times are people made promises or how many times people think that they will get into a position and that they can stay on, but the preference, legitimate or not legitimate, is going to somebody else. Be very clear and very fair in what you demand and what you can ask, but also it has to be coming from both ends. So that is kind of an enterprise perspective that I want to share with you when it comes to retention. Then there is the individual perspective, and this is also something we really have to listen to. If you ask people to do things against their nature, against their drives, where they cannot be authentic, they have to shut up because there is no psychological safety, they cannot contribute. They don't feel that they have a meaningful contribution because the manager is saying, I'm sorry, your ideas are great, but the system doesn't allow us. Or people are feeling that they go to the job, go behind a computer, they actually do some data entry the whole day and they go home. Nobody is interested in them. They don't feel that they belong there. Like I mentioned before, they have a headache. Instead of taking an aspirin and going to the job, they stay at home. So this is an individual perspective. If you feel that you get attention, if you feel that you can make a meaningful contribution, that you add value, then you have an individual perspective that really forms loyalty and really forms the right setting to take the extra mile. Now, there's also another perspective, and that is coming a little bit between the two, and therefore I use the symbol of this impossible triangle, which is actually possible if you look at it. It is the career perspective. The career perspective that is important for the enterprise, but also important for the individual. And when it comes to retention, do we actually give people the right opportunity? Or are we framing them in these career paths where it says, like, you start here and then you can grow horizontal or you can grow in the vertical, but that's it. You cannot swap. What is really the opportunity we're offering people? Do we really give them the opportunity also to kind of have an idea, maybe go on a little, maybe 1 or 2 days internship to see if there's something else that they can contribute? And there's another element to it, and that is what I call role and mandate. If you are going for a career, how far can you go and what kind of role are you getting in order to take those gentle steps, like Peter used the metaphor of by little drops and not just a bucket. And then there's the element of personal development. I have seen so many times in so many organizations, and there are exceptions, you have the deliberately development organizations, the DDE enterprises, where everything is about developing yourself in a right way with a very strong feedback culture, very transparent, open, sometimes even blunt feedback. But this is how it works. People learn and develop themselves in context. And if you want to offer people a career, then it means that you have to give them that space. You have to give them that attention. And it goes by little steps. It goes by stretching, but also this safe environment where people are able to get the opportunity to chase after their career by personal development. That means, how can I get all these flavors? How can I get all these experiments? How can I share this with my environment in order to take the right step? And can I be frank and open about it? And retention for me is something that should replace the annual appraisal reviews. Why? For me, I think it is ultimately, and maybe I'm a little bit blunt now, but I want to challenge you. An annual appraisal is actually utterly ridiculous. A candidate, an employee, knows what his performance has been. A manager too. Why have a dialogue about it? Then you're way too late. After a year, you cannot do any interventions anymore. You're too late. So that component of appraisal, that should be on a day-to-day basis. Like Pili also referred this unsupervised feedback, this instant feedback. This is what you do in order to ensure the performance. When it comes to retention, you also have to have the idea, what can I do to retain you? Can I offer you the position, even in the same role, but adjusted according to your personal development, adjusted to your career perspective? And if I cannot, then I should have a different kind of retention dialogue. Then I should say, what can I do to bring you to a new environment, maybe even to a competitor, or maybe even to a supplier? What can I do in all fairness when it comes to outplacement? Do I dare to have that discussion with an individual every year? Will you stay or will you go? And I can only ask these questions if I'm capable of saying, I can give you a solid promise that the next year you can develop yourself in this perspective, and the kind of request for you to contribute by this performance. Let me give you a practical example. When I was restarting a company that went bankrupt, we had to, and it was a sales organization delivering education and for the IT market with Microsoft training, etc., etc. And the data that I had was that every account manager sticks around 3 years in a contract. The first year he is exploring, finding his way to get onto his performance level, getting onto target. The second year, they try to balance, and then they get restless because the third year is kind of repetitive for them. And the annual, the figures showed that on average they stayed 3 years. Although they were asking me in the company to have an undetermined contract, an employment contract. So I asked them, if you only stay 3 years, why would I give you an undetermined employee contract? Why don't we make an agreement? Let's stay 3 years, but already have the dialogue on year 2, after year 2, about your retention. Do you want to stay, or should we use the last year to make sure that we can have a succession, to make sure that we can find you another job for outplacement? And that is also giving a kind of workforce mobility, that I have a new force in place, and that I have a workforce in place that is maybe very skilled, but not dedicated anymore to do the things. So this is also how I can create mobility. And I think the right way forward is to have a retention dialogue every year and replace it with your appraisal dialogue at the end of an HR cycle. And I think that is also a mindset, saying if you love people, it is also an element of love that you can say goodbye, that you can take a distance. And if you do that, then they might come back later on. As I say to my family, I have a daughter of 30 and I have daughters of 12, 11 and almost 6 years now. At one point, I have to let them go. I cannot hold them together because that is a retention I cannot have. But helping them already with a perspective, at one point, you're free to travel around the world. You're free to explore, but you will always have a solid place here. And I think this is a way we can treat our talents in a far better way. They will always be the ambassador because you help them with their career, and they will always talk positive about the way you treat them. I've also heard the expression many times, like people are hired for their skills, but they leave for their behavior. And if you tap in a little bit deeper, why do they leave? Most likely because they don't feel that they belong anymore. They don't have a meaningful contribution, and they're sick and tired of the way management is treating them. And I know this sounds very blunt and harsh, and of course there are a lot of exceptions. But talk to the people, or look at the surveys that are shown by McKinsey or by the Boston Consultancy Group. I'm sure you can find these things. People leave because they are made a promise that is not coming true. And of course, people will also leave because they don't want to, because they don't feel But anyway, I think retention is a major, major element of integral talent management. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of insights. And like Peter said, like the TMA is helping you to dive in a little bit deeper. It is giving you the mental capacity to understand yourself in a better and in a deeper way, but also your employees. That is the way we communicate. This is the way how we understand each other. This is why families are successful. I am successful with my wife until so far. I'm not saying that we will be there for the rest of our life, but until so far we are, because we have a dialogue, because we understand each other, because we take the energy and we take the momentums to dive in really deeper in understanding each other. That is the basic of retaining my relationship. This is the basic of retaining my workforce. And that takes a lot of courage and a lot of good comprehensive leadership. And for that, I want to give the speaker and the platform to my dear friend Andreas to help you with that. Thank you, Sam.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andre. A lot of good information and a lot of questions that we're going to bring up during the Q&A part of the session. But right now, what I'd like to do is introduce you to Andreas Fritsch. He's the executive coach and trainer at Fritsch Consulting Group, and he's a recognized personal coach in Austria and Germany, and specializes in helping people become more engaged, fostering motivation and high performance in teams. He does this by using a modern diagnosis tool such as the Tma Method to understand how people tick, so he can create teams with extraordinary impact. So Andreas, it's on to you. Let's see, is that Andreas? Can you go ahead and hear us? We see you.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me as well.
I can.
Perfect, super. So thank you, Sam, for introducing let's say my passion, which is really developing people. And we are doing that in a very, very different way. And this is one of actually the ways we are approaching change process. It's just we are doing it different. And this is, for example, the reason why I want to directly plug into what Peter said. I will work unplugged for you guys. So we will have not a single sheet of PowerPoint presentation for this next 20 minutes. I hope you will enjoy it. Maybe you said, well, where are the PowerPoint presentation? Actually, I have paid for that. Did you? So, okay, not going there. And what we do today is basically something extremely interesting, because these guys that you can see here, Viktor Frankl, Sigmund Freud, Paul Watzlawick, Raoul Schindler, they have something in common. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. You see, not everything is in common. This one is German. These guys are Austrian, but they have one extremely important thing in common. They are all talking about this kind of a world. And they were talking about that because not a single one of them is still with us to explain what he thought about that and why he is coming up with these thoughts. So I would love to share my thoughts with you guys. First of all, let me check. I can see Andreas, not the slides, but I hear him still. Guys, is this working? I can't see Andreas. Yes, still. This is not so good.
So we can see you, Andreas.
Is it working?
Yes, I see you. I see you right now.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully everyone, not me, but as I am working unplugged, you can only see what I have here in the cameras. So let's start with that thing. I have not prepared, as I said, any PowerPoint presentation, but I would love to show you one of the most important worlds that we know, which is our world, which is the Vuca World. What is that? Andre mentioned so many of the aspects of a Vuca World so far, and why this managing of a Vuca World and why leadership in a Vuca World is so important in our days. I think you will definitely understand after these 20 minutes. So Vuca means we're living in a volatile world. So everything is changing rapidly. Volatility is accompanying us. I don't want to mention COVID or something like that. You guys all know what's going on. This makes people uncertain. They are not sure about what is going on. And leadership is even more important in these times than it ever was. We have such an incredible complexity around us because everything is growing in form of an exponential function. And we cannot be clear about so many things because they are ambivalent and ambiguous. There's a lot of ambiguity in our world. And this is what basically creates Vuca. And to make that clear, this should not happen anymore. This volatility, we can basically not avoid it. We cannot avoid that things are changing at such a dramatic speed. We can contribute a bit to avoid something like this Corona thing around us. I really call it like that. But we cannot avoid Vuca because this is happening. This is our world. Welt, which is, let's say, happening automatically, which is the Vuca world. To know how to manage it, I give you a second world, which is Vuca 2. And Vuca 2 is basically a conclusion out of everything my dear TMA friends and colleagues mentioned before. Because Vuca World 2 means Welt and world. You see, I've just learned that by heart. Vuca 2 means that in order to really work with our people, we need to show them a reason why. We need to show them a vision. And here comes TMA. We need to really understand what is going on, not only the big Vuca environment, but also on a very, very individual level, how our people are ticking and clicking. And we have to communicate even more. Exchange, communicate even in home office situations where we are so far away from each other and very often cannot really connect and no mirror neurons are flying around. We cannot even drink a coffee together. And last but not least, Andre managed that we have to stay agile. So agility definitely is key to manage a Vuca world. And let me tell you something about that. Agility, or everything around this Vuca 2 approach, is exactly this. It is a mindset. And before you guys start using tools, before you start using TMA with your teams and work with that, by the way, out of my perspective, one of the best talent personality tools that we have worldwide, I know a lot of these kind of tools, you need the right mindset installed in yourself and installed in your teams before you can use tools. And now coming back to the Vuca world, and I would like to be a little bit provocative now. Provocative in terms of, I tell you things that you might not want to hear. Nevertheless, I warned you before that we are doing things differently. And in order to start that, I want to show you what mermaid management is. And to understand mermaid management, we need to understand how people are ticking and clicking and why they are doing that. Before I dive right into the mermaid pool, my friends, something extremely important, and I really want to give you that as a starter to understand one of the guys that I mentioned before. If you treat people how they are, they will become worse. If you treat them like they could be, they definitely will become better. If you treat people like they could be, they will definitely become better. And this is basically what we see if we look here, if we look at the personalities of people, if we understand how they are really ticking and clicking in the Vuca world. And you know who said that? It was not a management guru or something extremely experienced coming from a management consulting firm. This was one of the guys I mentioned before. This was Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. If you treat people how they are, they will become worse. If you treat them like they could be, they will become better. And this is the basic of mermaid management. Why is this the basic? Because if I now start to open the pool where the mermaids are living, it could be a little bit harsh. And maybe you will say, no, this is not nice to put people into aquarium boxes or something like that. But you will see very soon that this is the way to understand management in the Vuca world. So we have a wonderful deep aquarium here, and this aquarium is your company. And you have people and employees in your company who are maybe in a state of motivation, in a state of mind that they really want to do their job. They have high state of will. And you have other people who are really extremely skilled. Peter mentioned the performance matrix. I want to integrate that. By the way, this is something you can really measure with TMA. You can exactly measure that with TMA. We see in the will kind of a behavior that people have. And the skill is shown by talents people have. And now we start. We have people here, and they will all be familiar to you, who want to do things, who want to be successful, who want to reach specific goals, and who want to really contribute to your goals, to your company, let's say, ideas, products, services, whatsoever. And we have employees and co-workers and managers as well, who already have all the skills they need as well. Great, isn't it? And these guys I call the captains. The captains. And this would be a development process to come from here to there. Very easy, just flip from one quadrant to the other. But there are also people, and we have to be realistic on that, who are not willing to do and to perform, and others who are neither skilled and talented, nor do they want to perform. I would skip this quadrant because just assuming they are not existing in your company, this would be maybe a little bit unrealistic. Maybe they are, but I just assume they are not there. And now it comes to one of the biggest challenges out of different reasons. In almost every organization, we have people that could perform, but they are not doing it because they are not appreciated, because someone told them things that were not true, I just remember to this wonderful, that wonderful comic with Snoopy lying on his hut. It's due to the wrong job description. I was fooled by that. Who survived different mergers and acquisitions, who had wrong bosses, who had wrong situations. What happens? They could behave like that. And what we call this behavior, we call it mermaid behavior. Why? Because mermaids are beautiful, they are interesting, they are precious, but they eat the young, let's say, hoffnungsvoll, which I would not say hopeful, the young, talented, motivated, experienced sailors. Not yet experienced sailors, they want to grow. And if we have a motivational curve where they are starting here from point number, let's say 1, they have a motivational lack, because they see that sometimes reality is not exactly going along with what they were told. And after that, they meet the mermaids and they probably get eaten in the valley of tears. And if you guys, if you handle these situations and if you show them what their talents really are and what they can do in situations where they're not happy with their job, with their environment, with their colleagues, with what they do. If you as a manager can show that to them, and it's not the mermaid who shows them how terrible things really are, you can bring these great young talents into their personal flow and make them skilled and motivated as well. And to make something very, very clear, these mermaids, they are not there to be killed. And this is something we hear often. Oh, cool, great that you mentioned that. And mermaids, oh, we have to kill them. They are just disturbing us. They are just, let's say, influencing all the others. They are killing our atmosphere. They are killing our culture in the company. No, my friends, this is not the approach. This would be much too easy. Because for the mermaids, there is one rule. Give them a chance to change. Because if you do so, these guys are the most valuable investments of your time. Because they are skilled, they have talents, they are underperforming out of different reasons. And if you can manage them, if you can understand them, if you understand how they're ticking and clicking, if you communicate in the right way, if you give them a vision, and if you handle the situations with a very, very agile approach, you have this huge potential of bringing them upwards in this matrix. Sometimes this is very hard. It's easier for these guys here. It's really a challenge if they are deep underwater in our iceberg picture. So this is mermaid management. And why am I showing you that? Please, before you start managing them and before you start using TMA, go into the mindset. Check. TMA is tool set. You guys are mindset. And check 2 things. What potential is there? What can we do? And make 100% clear that you are not a mermaid yourself, which sometimes could happen. Don't get me wrong, but this is something that we experience very often. This is basically the idea of leadership in the Vuca world and mermaid management. I hope I could make these things, the ideas behind that clear. And if you want to measure that, behavior and talents, you can perfectly do that with TMA, but don't start with that before having the right mindset in place.
Thank you, Andre. That was outstanding, outstanding. So you're quite the artist. We have a game in the United States. It's called Pictionary, and you have to draw it nicely. And I happen to fail at that each time our team loses. So next time you're in the United States, you're going to be on my team. I tell you this.
Cool. We'll see. I will definitely try my very best. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So one thing I want to bring up before we jump into the Q&A, and I'd like to invite all our panelists to go ahead and share their screen as we go through this section. But one thing before we start with Q&A is I want to talk about the benefits of those that are attending here live today. So we do have the TMA assessment and a glimpse of the TMA tool that will provide to each one of you. So basically, after this session, we'll send you a TMA assessment, and you'll be able to see what the participant portal looks like as your results filter in. And so that's always fun. And what we'll do is we'll also join with you and have a quick coaching session of how to utilize that portal in its best fashion. And perhaps you'll be able to have some more interaction with some of our experts here today. So Andre, would you want to, anything that you would like to say in conclusion of our session today before we get to questions?
As a conclusion, that is maybe a little bit too premature, but first of all, let me thank you for all the contributions of my partners. Like I said, halfway, it really makes me proud to see this kind of engagement and that our mindsets are so much aligned. And let's spread it out and see it as a very positive virus that we can bring to the world. That is a game changer on a different end.
Okay.
Yeah, and when I look at the questions and the response, I think we had a very nice session and very interesting questions. So I'm sure that me and my partners are willing to answer that.
So we do have a few questions in the Q&A section. Nancy's asking, how do flexible companies, in order to support development for everyone, how do they have an approach that is flexible to accommodate everyone in the company? Who would like to take that? How about Billy?
Thank you, Sam. Would you be able to read it again, because I cannot see it in my computer anymore? I think it was erased. I think is it correct?
So it's the questions from Nancy, and her question, if I'm capturing it correctly, I'm summarizing it. So how do companies have a flexible approach to the development of their people? I mean, everybody is learning in different ways and so forth. So how do we have a flexible approach?
Okay. Yes. Sorry, I was confused with the other question. In my experience, at least here in Mexico, of course, companies are really focused on the minimis. I don't know if that concept is familiar to you, regarding to a very famous movie in which you're just looking for someone exactly like you to cover a position, right? My focus here is I always try to explain my clients that everyone is different and that it is going to be impossible to find someone like you with your own talents. So I usually try to get them with some examples regarding my partner and me, which we are completely different. Although we're very close, we're completely different, and we have opposite talents. And if we use them correctly, then we will be able to get the best of the people. So when talking about flexibility in these characteristics of a profile, we need to understand first what they need to achieve at the end. The greatest challenge here is that they are focused on the characteristics of the person instead of the objective they're trying to cover or to achieve, you know. So first of all, we need to understand what do you want to do with that person or with the role, and then we can help you to gather all the characteristics. And to do that, we use the CSA, and I'm sure that Nancy already knows the CSA. She's a certified professional here in Mexico, so I'm sure that that using that tool is going to be very useful for her to to make the companies more flexible, you know.
Great, thank you. So
I would like to add something to that. It also is something about courage. If you are in the field of HR or are you a manager, and you are in this protocol of having an annual appraisal where you combine it with a personal development plan, and you have to make a choice as a manager from a preset of courses or coaching sessions or whatever, in order to have this annual dialogue with people. That means, like, if you're only restricted to this kind of limitation in terms of choice, then you cannot really tap in. So it takes the courage to step away from that. And there's also another element to it, and that is the mindset again. We have to understand that through development, when you internalize the theory and the new knowledge that you have to internalize that. And that is what you have to experiment in day-to-day practice. So if you really want to develop your people, give them the space, have a dialogue about it, and drop the format that you already have, but pay individual attention. And that is also where a kind of a question that I have for those people who are in the field of HR. Why are you trying to create such a format? One does not fit all. And the TMA is also helping you in identifying what is the preferred learning style of a candidate. Does he need a formal setting or an informal setting? Is it more practical or is it more theoretically? Is he more autodidactive or does he need support? And do realize that when it comes to learning, like Peter said, it goes drop by drop. It is about internalization. And that we should never forget that.
Mm-hmm. Another question that we have here is from Harold, and he mentions that there's the TMA method is there's so many pieces to it. How can we determine the return on investment, the investment that a company should make to go to this direction? Is there something some metrics or something that you're aware of that you use, Andre, for the success of such a platform?
Yeah, of course, we've done some research in our department, in our company. We have a research and development. People are doing the right analytics. And of course, when you implement the TMA system in itself, it's not something just throw in a set of tools. It is also about, how do you manage it when it comes to business process modeling. And then you have to, of course, have an idea about what is the performance or what are the key indicators at this point and how does the TMA impact on this. And we have cases where we have proven to be effective in delivering 27 more productivity, retaining with 25%. All these cases are there. Nonetheless, this is also what I believe. We cannot deliver the world by one fits all. There's also a cultural aspect on it. There's also a local color to it, couleur locale, as the French say. So what we do in order to do this, to measure the return on investment, is we kind of frame it. What are we replacing? What are the numbers before? And what are the numbers afterwards? And if you think about it, if I would mention to you, if you have let's take the United States, an average, let's say, average wage of $40,000 a year. Let's just pick a number. How much do you want to invest? What is your IT investment on this, on each individual? When I'm asking you for 1% as an annual fee for it, or 0.5%, and you look that and you see that sick rate, short absent leaves is going down, productivity is going up, it's a no-brainer. but you have to make this investment, and you should take it the same as what Peter was saying about personal development. You have to take it step by step. I think it is too much to say like we can fully integrate talent management within 3 months. So take it step by step and follow the results on that, and then you will have your benefits. Mm-hmm. It's just how much do we invest? And when it comes to personal development, a simple Excel course is easily between $250 and $350, right? If you attend. So we're not even charging that for offering people the mental capacity and all the development tools for that. So make your balance on that.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah?
So a question for Andreas. So Andreas, there's so many, when we look at companies in many countries, there's often, when we have the executive team that comes together, I mean, a lot of times they're not quite meshing, or there's some issues and so forth. So I know in your leadership development and how do you bring these teams together? I mean, do you use a particular methodology that you would first employ?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. We do. So one of the most important things is that people are experiencing themselves. This is in times like we have them right now, not that easy because we cannot even get in touch. What we try to do really to integrate people in a very, very early stage, and we are working with, if we just go to TMA, we are working with something that is called online analysis, where we can see the team talents, how the team members are ticking and clicking, and make that visible to all of the other team members, for example, in an onboarding process. And this is something that we can really do online, and I can just recommend that to each and every manager, leader, or let's say team member who is responsible for projects, to really apply these kinds of visibility, to make things visible to the team and to communicate. And one important thing I want to add to the last question, measurability, and how can we measure success? I just want to give you one insight into our experience, learnings, the last 20 years that I'm doing executive coaching. If we have a look at this matrix, we know that people who really want to do things, they will be successful at a rate of around 80%. 80%. This is our experience in teams. People who do not want to, they will be successful at a rate of around 10%. So they will be almost 100% clear they will not be successful. And just to see this proportion, we understand how important talent management is to, let's say, to integrate these guys into the captain's field, to bring them up, to understand how they are ticking and clicking and what the problem is. Measurably, so let's say it's hard to measure, but this is an approach where we can see the importance of really doing that. And this has also, I think, to do with your, with the first question.
Great. Yeah. Super important to make sure you're bringing on the right people, which is definitely a question for Jorge here. So Jorge, as you mentioned, in identifying the right competencies to ensure that we're bringing on, identifying the right candidates and their knowledge, skills, abilities, their competencies and behaviors and so forth. So how do you determine the right competency set for a particular job?
Well, thank you very much, Sam. So basically, it's the key element to in which we understand or select the competencies that are attached to the position. It's how the manager measures success. So and in order to do this, I encourage people not to use the classic framework, which is the SMARTY goal, which is because what I have realized is when people try to express what the position needs to do, and using this framework is very complicated to articulate in one session in which the people is trying to express what they really want. So my advice to this is, please tell me in your own words what this person needs to do in order to be proficient at this job. And then when I have a clear understanding of this, I try to repeat it in my own words, what I'm understanding about what the person or the hiring manager said. And then this is one key element. And the other key element is what are the contexts in which the position is surrounded. So what are the things, for example, that the things that that people need to improve if this is a replacement of the position? What are the support or the lack of support that this position is going to have to be proficient at the role? What also it's what are the to understand not the activity itself, but the whole process in which, for example, what is the input of the activity, what is the activity itself, and the output of the activity. How are the stakeholders that this person needs to influence or to work with? So once I have understand this, I can go back to the to TMA to select the competencies. And TMA has a wonderful tool in which you can identify what are the key area results, and then help you to understand what are the key competencies, the suggested competencies that you can apply for this position. Mm-hmm. That would be my recommendation in order to understand or to select the competencies for the position.
Great. Thank you so much, Jorge. Now, I know that we are at the top of the hour. However, we just one quick question, if I wouldn't mind, for you, Peter. So how do we get, I mean, there's a lot of small companies that are growing fast. They're not really thinking about development and so forth. And what are the top things we need to do to convince leadership that development is critical?
It's a short question with an answer with 25 opportunities to to share too. For me, it's very important to start. Maybe I repeat what Andreas and Andre say. It's to start to learn to think with the right mindset. So an example I sometimes give to them is by asking, okay, how many people in growing companies did you hire, and after 2 years, how many people are still there? So in general, you get a figure like 50%, let's say. Now, the 50%, it's a huge cost, of course, to replace. This has been mentioned. Now, what's so important is to have a kind of overview. It's a kind of data analysis, and it's possible with this material and with this tooling, in order to see what type of talents do you have inside. So this is the first step. Let's try to know what do we have inside our company. There are opportunities to simplify. You push on the button and you have the names of the guys and the girls that are related to a certain competency and drivers. This is one. The second one, once you have all this, it's so important to calculate the investment needed from people internally compared to the hiring cost externally. And believe me, a lot of companies are quickly convinced once they compare these two elements. So main thing is, let's not forget the internal talents, I should say, before going outside. I try to answer shortly.
Yes. Thank you so much, Peter. Now, with the any remaining questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat here, or we'll get back to you, or add them to social media. We'll collect them there and can respond in those locations. I want to make sure that we thank all of our panelists for dedicating their time today and telling us a little bit about the TMA method and how it's used across the globe. So thank you so much. Also, I'd want to identify or recognize Abdallah. Abdallah is going to be sending each of our participants today the TMA. Hey, Abdallah. He's going to send everybody the TMA assessment, so you can take that, and we're going to go ahead and schedule some time and to go through that assessment with you. And once again, thank you, Abdallah, for putting together the wonderful presentation that we had today. It was great.
My pleasure.
All right. No more to do. I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful evening or morning, depending on where you are in the globe. And thank you very much for your time.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.